I wanted to ask folks if you could keep your mics on mute and the video off, depending on your preference. When asking questions, please raise your hand, and that will happen near the end of the meeting, where we'll have questions and answers. When you're, again, want to say that I'm available. If you have any accommodation needs, please send me a direct message in the chat box. All materials for today's meeting can be made available in other languages. We have one-pagers and a PowerPoint available for the RFPQ in Spanish. This meeting will be simultaneously interpreted into Spanish on another channel. And with that, I would like to introduce our interpreter, Rosie, to give a little bit of instructions today on how to use the Zoom interpretation channel.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Rosie, interpreter. And this morning, what everybody needs to do, I already assigned myself as an interpreter before I click OK, because if you guys are not in the right channel, you guys are not going to be able to hear if there is a Spanish speaker or a question that I need to interpret into English. So you make sure that everyone goes to the interpretation button on the bottom where the globe is, and make sure that you click on the English channel. If you don't need interpretation, you still need to click on the English channel. But if you need interpretation, make sure you click on the language of your preference, Spanish in this case. And now we'll give the instructions in Spanish also. But yeah, just make sure, please, everyone is on the English channel. That way I can switch and I can interpret on English and en Spanish. Buenos días. En este día quiero dar las instrucciones. Si necesitan usar los servicios de interpretación, abajo en la pantalla hay un globito. Si lo presionan, va a indicar el idioma de su preferencia. Entonces va a poder usted escuchar al intérprete y puede usted aplastar lo que es el audio original. Also, if they don't want, people that are using like the Spanish channel or interpretation, I mean, they can choose to mute the original sound. Okay, so I'm going to assign myself as an interpreter and give you back the power of host. Okay, Ty.
Thank you so much. Rosie. With that, welcome everyone again to Washington County Supportive Housing Services Proposers Conference. I'd like to introduce our Chief Equity Officer of the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, Latricia Tillman, to give us a short welcoming and also just acknowledgement of the work that we're doing today as we move forward. Latricia Tillman has a tremendous experience in working in the field of equity in a number of areas, including health, including housing as well. And so with that, I'd like to turn over to Latricia Tillman for our introduction.
Thanks, Ty, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. On behalf of all of us at Washington County, we are so eager to begin the work of implementing the Supportive Housing Services Program, and we know we can only do it with a robust, diverse, and dedicated network of service providers, which includes all of you. Our staff have been working diligently to prepare this first procurement process. The RFPQ, or in normal speak, the request for programmatic qualifications. So they're prepared to tell you about what that is and how it will work. And essentially, it's our first step towards building a system of a system of care that is equitable, accessible, effective, and that creates stable housing for our community members who need it the most. As you know, Washington County is one of the most diverse counties in the state of Oregon, with 1/3 of our population being Latina, Latino, Latinx, Black, Indigenous, Asian, and Pacific Islander, as well as other immigrant and refugee populations. And we know that the housing crisis is disproportionately impacting these communities, and that the Supportive Housing Services Program gives us an opportunity and the responsibility to lead with race and to work towards racial equity and racial justice with our housing solutions. This measure, approved by voters last year, is game-changing. And because of this regional investment to address houselessness, we also need to change the way we play the game here in Washington County. And that means lifting up small, emerging, and culturally specific organizations to fully participate in the work of delivering care to the community that you are already serving and where you already have trust and relationship. So this also means that we're holding ourselves and one another to higher standards. This process aims to be transparent, accessible, and equitable, creating an open door to build new and support existing partnerships. We also expect our partners to commit to standards of care, equitable practices, housing first, and trauma-informed models, culturally responsive models, and deliver equitable outcomes through the services you provide. We know we have a huge job ahead, and we're grateful that you're here with us, ready to join us arm in arm and get started. So as I turn it over to Ty to continue facilitating our time here today, I want to send a big thank you out to all the wonderful staff who've been helping. This has been a very collaborative, cross-departmental effort, and it includes staff from the Department of Housing Services, Health and Human Services, Community Corrections, and the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. So we're working together internally and really excited to work together with you as well to move the work forward. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Latricia, for that welcome. With that, I'm going to quickly go over the agenda for today. So we will be spending the first half of this meeting presenting some slides from you'll hear from my colleagues. And then the second half of the meeting, I want to encourage folks to prepare questions. You can, at any time, go ahead and put those questions in the chat box while the presentation is happening. But you'll also have a chance to ask those questions in the second half of the meeting. So starting off, we'll have a little history of this work in the Supportive Housing Services, Supportive Housing Services in the Washington County Program overview, the request for Programmatic Qualifications overview, the request for Programmatic Qualifications application and quality review, and then there will be some links as well made available. And we will wrap things up with questions. So today you'll be hearing from members of our Supportive Housing Services, Josh Kreitz, the Department of Housing Services Assistant Director, Jess Larson, the Washington County Housing Services Supportive Housing Services Program Manager, and Alex Devin, our Washington County Housing Services and Supportive Housing Services Service Network Administrator. So with that, I will turn it over to Alex, who is our first presenter.
I think
actually, we'll turn it over to Jess.
Thank you. Thanks, Ty and Alex. More from Alex in just a minute. I'm excited to introduce you all to him. And Ty, thank you so much. Thank you, Latricia. Thank you, everyone who's joined us here for the next hour and 15 minutes or so. We're so excited to be here with you and to be beginning this big journey together of bringing robust, abundant services and care to our community in Washington County. So Alex is going to describe more of the nuts and bolts of the details of the RFPQ. And my job is to simply get us grounded and kind of on the same page together with where we're coming from, what's the purpose of the RFPQ, and how it will all fit into the services ahead. So, pardon me, I'm going to just go through some quick details about the measure and the Supportive Housing Services Program, which I'm sure you're all very well familiar with. But just in case there are new folks with us who aren't aware, essentially, voters passed a game-changing measure last May. It was 58% of voter support from across the region to enact what is called the Supportive Housing Services Program, made possible by way of two new taxes that are going to generate approximately $200 million every year to provide supportive services, supportive housing services in the 3 counties. This measure was championed by a broad coalition. I am sure many of you on this call were a part of this game-changing coalition. Community leaders, elected leaders, business leaders, housing leaders, you all came together to envision what could be possible if we had enough resource to really meet the care and needs of our community to address homelessness. And you were successful, and we are so grateful. This new measure is going to have the capacity to fully address our regional needs of ending chronic homelessness. I'm going to say that again. It is our goal to reach functional zero in chronic homelessness as a tri-county system of care. That is what is game-changing. Imagine when we have enough supportive housing, enough caseworkers, enough housing units, enough rent assistance, so that whenever anyone is at risk of falling into prolonged homelessness or has been experiencing the traumas of prolonged homelessness, we have what it takes to meet them where they're at and get them on track to housing and have the supports they need to be stable in that housing. That's the vision of the system we are working to create and what will be possible because of this new funding. To date, it's the largest known per capita investment anywhere in the nation. So we have a really big assignment in front of us. It's very exciting. And we hope to be the model of the best practice of what can be done when we put our resources to work to address chronic homelessness and prevent homelessness as well. So that's what this measure makes possible, and that all leads into the work we can't do on our own. Washington County can't be successful without partnerships with service providers who are already doing this work. You are already the boots on the ground in Washington County and elsewhere in our community, and we need more boots on the ground. We need more capacity and service provision to make this possible. So that's why this RFPQ has been created to build out that network of service providers in Washington County who will help us deliver this new system of care. Okay, next slide, please. So again, just grounding us in a reminder of what the Supportive Housing Services Measure, who the Supportive Housing Services Measure is structured to serve. So we want to start first with a foundational expectation and understanding that all of the work we are doing with the Supportive Housing Services Program will be done while leading with race. Our objective here is to both create permanent, supportive, stable housing options, but also to address embedded systemic racism and racial disparities in our communities. And so we must do both at the same time. By leading with race, we must be ensuring that we are correcting these racial disparities in our community and advancing and bringing about racial equity through the outcomes, through the services we provide, the people we serve, and the quality of care we provide. So in leading with race, we will be focusing on ensuring equitable access, services, and outcomes for Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Asian, and Pacific Islander households, and other households who are disproportionately impacted by housing instability and homelessness. As well, The measure describes two different priority populations, and essentially for simplicity's sake, you can think of them as priority population focusing on serving, priority population A is generally a focus in serving those who experience or are at risk of experiencing chronic homelessness. That is a federal definition generally. So we want a local definition that's more flexible. And that's what priority population A aims to be. So it's flexible in that it can include a broader definition of how we estimate the time someone has experienced homelessness. Also, it includes families with disabilities who might not be counted in the federal definition. So a local definition of prolonged or chronic homelessness, which would serve people with disabilities who are at risk or currently experiencing prolonged homelessness and also have extremely low incomes. And the measure prescribes that, or defines that, at least 75% of our resources must be dedicated to serving this population. So please hear, as you're building out your vision for service provision, a strong importance in ensuring we're delivering services to households who fit in this priority population A category. And then 25% of the resources are also to be directed sort of upstream or in preventative or in short-term sort of approaches to addressing housing instability. Really, priority population B is essentially anyone else who might experience homelessness, who's lost a job and needs to get back on their feet and back into housing. So economic housing, homelessness that's driven by economic conditions, but also households who are at risk, households who might be housed now but have very limited incomes and the rents are going up. And so to prevent their homelessness, we need to intervene with a housing with supportive housing services. So that is priority population B generally. And the measure describes and instructs us that 25% of our resources must be dedicated to serving this population. So this is just a quick review of the service of who we aim to provide services to through the supportive housing services measure, and who we would be asking you to join us in serving to meet the goals of this program. Next slide, please. All right, so really the request for programmatic qualifications is an opportunity to build out that service provider network as I was describing. And we see the services of the service provider network to sort of fall in these 5 bucketed areas. There's no real perfect way to structure out these 5 different buckets because every organization is uniquely structured, and you're uniquely structured to serve the population that you are designed to serve. And we celebrate that and want to support that. And so we're not asking organizations to shift your structure or redesign the way you're doing your work, but for the purposes of the program, the different kinds of programs we need to build out through supportive housing services, we've created these 5 different program components, and we're inviting you to make an application to provide services in as many as 1 to 5 of these different areas. So you can have a program that is designed to do all of these things. You can have a program that's designed to do 1 or 2 or 1 and sometimes 3. It can go lots of different ways. But what's important is that we're looking for service providers who do at least 1 of these things and maybe want to do more. And you tell us exactly how you are going to design and structure and deliver the services that you provide. But let me walk through the 5 different areas and describe the different kinds of services we imagine in these bucketed areas that will then help describe or help you understand the application you will, how you structure your application. Okay, so in supportive housing services, we see the service provision, the work of partnering with our service providers to include everything from the outreach to working with people where they're at in our community, experiencing homelessness, needing to connect with the system, needing to connect with care, needing to build relationships so they're ready to connect with care, all of that work. That's sometimes the outreach and engagement. Sometimes it includes the community connect assessments, or the coordinated entry system that we run here in Washington County. It can include referrals to other programs that provide basic needs that help people connect to getting on track for housing services. And sometimes that outreach work is really just the first step to then housing navigation work. So sometimes you might have your programs designed really to work in tandem, the outreach and engagement with the housing navigation or with the shelter transition and transitional housing. But so generally in bucket area 1, we've described a set of services that are pertaining to the outreach and engagement activities of bringing folks into the system and getting them ready to receive the care or getting them connected to whatever the care might be. The next bucket of services that you may consider applying for are regarding shelter and transitional housing operations and provision. Many of our partners here in Washington County have been operating the winter shelter system for us. We're looking to build out a year-long system of shelter. And that might include both congregate shelter and non-congregate shelter. It might include some transitional housing programs, some time-based, program-based transitional housing. You tell us the kind of service that you want to provide for the population that you are serving or desire to serve in Washington County. But generally, this is a second area of program that we are seeking service delivery for in support of housing services. I've spoken a little bit to the housing navigation, placement, and eviction prevention bucket of services, if you will. So this is all of that work that helps someone understand their barriers to accessing housing, overcoming those barriers, getting the IDs, the documents in order, paying off old landlord debt, whatever it might take, getting on all the right wait lists, right? Hopefully we won't have too long of wait lists because we'll have the new supportive housing services long-term rent assistance voucher to deploy. But nonetheless, all of that housing navigation work to get someone ready and on track to their housing plan, plus the services that prevent someone from falling into homelessness. So that short-term rent assistance or any other case management supports that are necessary to prevent homelessness in the first place. The next bucket of services is really designed around, once that household is in housing, the supportive housing stabilization services. So this can include your retention workers, your mobile case management teams who are bringing supportive housing services anywhere in the community to folks who are living, who use the tenant-based voucher and are living somewhere in the community and need those case management supports to be stable in housing. The resident services programs that are affordable housing programs operate when serving supportive housing households in your buildings. Resident services is a component of that stabilization service as well, and more. So those are sort of the housing-based ongoing supports to make sure that a household can be stable and successful in housing. And then the last bucket of services we've designed is described as the wraparound supports. So this is kind of like, and everything else, whatever it takes. This might include peer support programs, recovery support programs, community-based mental health programs, whatever it takes to help help households both engage in services on the front end and achieve wellness and well-being and economic stability. So disability benefit applications or employment programs. So these are sort of all the other services that are necessary and contribute to housing stability, but aren't necessarily defined by a housing-based program. So this is how we've designed the different programmatic components of the services we aim to solicit and secure through our partnerships, through all of your programs. And again, I want to stress, we know that it doesn't always get bucketed out in this way in the actual program delivery. So you'll describe in the application how your programs are described or designed and function and how you would like to define them. But we're creating this structure to just help with the application process. Okay, next slide, please. That was a lot of information. Now it's my time to describe what's not the services that we're not intending to secure through this RFPQ solicitation process. So we're not seeking long-term rent assistance administrators. We're going to use the team in the Housing Authority at Washington County who already administers long-term rent assistance vouchers through our federal programs like the Housing Choice Voucher or the Shelter Plus Care voucher. So that team already is very ready and able to do all the administrative back of the house management of administering the long-term rent assistance voucher, paying the rents month over month, et cetera. We want to make sure that as a service provider, you'll have access, very swift access to using these rent assistance vouchers as you're doing housing placement and working with providing supportive housing. But we're not asking for partners to administer the long-term rent assistance program. Similarly, we're not seeking services for technical assistance or training or any other sort of contracts at this time, for any sort of technical assistant contracts at this time. We are partnering with the Multnomah County's Joint Office Technical Assistance RFPQ that they just completed. And they built out a pool of qualified suppliers to provide technical assistance. And we can partner with that procurement process when we need technical assistance to build out our training systems and other technical building blocks of getting ready to implement supportive housing services. So this is not a solicitation for technical assistance. Similarly, in this RFPQ, we're not going to be distributing capacity building investments. That will absolutely be a part of supportive housing services and the investments we make in the first year, but it won't be a direct component of this RFPQ process. That will come afterwards, depending on the needs of the service provider partners that we've engaged, and especially looking at the needs of culturally specific organizations and their needs for capacity building. So that is a separate process. It's not described or a component of this application process. And then finally, we're not seeking any inter or intra-governmental partnerships at this time with this RFPQ. Of course, we're seeking those partnerships all of the time, but those are done through MOUs and intergovernmental agreements. They're not done through a procurement process such as this. So we just want to make sure if anyone is here on this call interested in providing any of that kind of support, we still want to be your partner and would be happy to have discussions with you, but these kinds of services won't be administered through this or secured through this RFPQ process. All right, next slide, please. And then the last thing for me to describe before I get to introduce you to Alex is the service delivery approaches that we are embracing and expecting as part as foundational to our service delivery of supportive housing services, foundational to the system of care we aim to build here in Washington County. So as we seek your partnership and as you make your application for this RFPQ, we want you to understand the importance of these delivery approaches and understand our expectation that you would be committing to take on these delivery approaches as part of the work of providing supportive housing services. So first and foremost, we seek to do all of our work based on a foundation of advancing racial equity in Washington County. So we will be seeking partners who are committed to advancing racial equity and can demonstrate that throughout your organization's work and also your program design. Similarly, we are expecting to build a system of care that is culturally responsive across the board. So all service providers will be expected to participate in training for culturally responsive services and understand what it means to provide culturally responsive care. And we also know that we need partners who themselves are culturally specific in their organizational structure and their program design. So while all organizations must hold to a standard of culturally responsive care, we need to invest, and we will need to partner with culturally specific service providers as well. The Supportive Housing Services Program is designed with a housing first model and approach. We understand, it is our expectation that housing is the first and best step towards ending homelessness. And then we design all of the supports that each individual household needs to ensure that housing is secured and then stable over time. But we expect all of our partners to employ a housing first model with your service approach as well. And then additional evidence-based practices that will be expected in program delivery and program design include low barrier approaches and harm reduction approaches, and of course, trauma-informed care, person-centered care. There's more here, but we just really want to create a strong foundation and understanding of the expectation that the system of care we're building in Washington County is based in these delivery approaches. Okay, so I hope that was a good introduction to the RFPQ why and what. Now Alex is going to get into the specifics of the actual application, the how of your application. So I'm really excited to turn it over to him. Alex has just newly joined our team here. He comes to us from LASA, the LA Continuum of Care, and brings a wealth of expertise in working in continuum of care programs, and also working in building out new voter approved flexible funding programs to align with those continuum of care programs. So we're excited to bring him aboard and to help to have his expertise in helping us build out this new system of care. And so I introduce you all to our new colleague, Alex Devin.
Close one there. I usually start off every Zoom meeting talking to myself for about 3 minutes before I forget that I'm on mute. My name is Alex Devin. I'm the System Network Administrator for Washington County. I'm really glad to be here and be embedded in this community and make it my home as well. So I'll go through the contractual requirements. I'll go through some of the RFPQ, and I will give a couple of helpful hints when you're crafting your narrative so that we can get you in the door. First, the contracts will have fiscal requirements, essentially budgeting, invoicing. We will provide an allocation template to you as an organization. And then we would like, as best possible, to have your organization in a position where there could be a timely billing and invoicing, essentially so we can keep track of the spending that we have as a continuum as a whole, and be able to shift appropriately throughout the year as needed to ensure that we're not letting any dollars sit or go to waste. And like we want to ensure that our contracts are very flexible in the sense that if you're burning hot or if you're burning cold, that we can be there to support and move things around as necessary. Contractors will need insurance. There's certain insurance-based requirements as you'll be working with a local government agency. So there is an expectation for your organization to be insured. Data management requirements, essentially, we are held accountable to our funder. And so a lot of the work we're doing will need to be tracked. And so the vast majority of it will be through the Homeless Management Information System. We're currently working on building out that infrastructure to ensure that all of you folks that come on board to do this programming will have a sufficient amount of licenses and access to track the work that you're doing. Coordinated entry, or the Community Connect as we call it here in Washington County. There an expectation of participation within Community Connect. We will be working with Community Connect as well as alongside Community Connect in some instances, but we want to have all organizations participating in that, community-based resource. We really want to build up our level of community partnerships, relationships amongst all the providers, so that essentially, if you've chosen to do 2 or 3 of those buckets, that you are, you're close to the other organizations that are doing the other buckets, and there's, we can provide those supports as needed in a very, trauma-informed, comfortable, non-clunky kind of a way. Performance measures, the expectations of funding. If you're, requesting to do shelter beds, a performance measure might be, the keeping your beds filled, and certain things like that. We'll be putting out very reasonable performance measures for this first year of contracting. We want everybody to be successful. We know that a lot of you might not have had contracts or government contracts before, are new to the game, are trying a new thing, want to participate, taking a risk as an organization, and we want you to be successful. And we're going to ensure that the performance measures that we put out there are obtainable. We want you to have obtainable measures. Pay equity. This one I really enjoy, because I've been harping on good pay for our caseworkers and our frontline workers for a long time, and this initiative is really giving us a lot of creative flexibility to ensure that the funding that you get for your programming will allow you to hire staff at a really nice, livable wage, that you'll be able to compete and find good people, and hopefully they'll stick around for years and years to come, because you'll be able to compensate them appropriately. And so, we're working really hard to ensure that your contracts, are very fair in that sense. And we're hoping that you, as a contractor, that will trickle down to the staff that you're promoting and you're hiring and you're bringing on board for this process. And then last but not least, everybody's favorite thing in the whole world, and that is contract monitoring. Don't be too nervous about contract monitoring. Essentially, the point of contacts that you'll have at Washington County will be the ones helping you get your contract. They'll be the ones helping you with technical assistance along the way. They'll be the people you call when you need help and you want approval for certain things, when you want to ask if you can or what we think, or how is it, how that kind of works. Those will essentially be the same people that'll be, coming out and monitoring your contracts and your programming. So there won't be any surprises. You're not going to have somebody just that you've never seen before show up on a random day and start looking through your stuff and start dinging. That's not like, we're trying to build a level of partnership. We all have to do this together. But there is essentially some contract monitoring. We want to make sure that, we're paving the way for your success along the way, so that when that does happen, there's no surprises, there's no fear, there's no, worriedness about it. It's a smooth transition. Next slide, please, Ty. Here we go. So I think this has been said about 3 times, but it's really important. So if you hear something 3 or 4 times in a presentation, it probably means that it's really important. We are really seeking culturally specific organizations. We want community-based service providers. We want affordable housing providers. We want outreach organizations. We want a lot of you that are already doing this work. You might already be doing it on a shoestring budget. You're doing it as a side project. You might be doing it in the evenings because it's not funded in any way. We want to bring you on board and build you up and make you a part of this network, essentially, that we're trying to create. And so no organization is too small at this point. There's a lot of room for growth, right? So, if you're a faith-based organization and you're doing a feeding program and you want to expand it out and have some sort of an outreach aspect to it, that's perfect. We welcome those types of things. So, the possibilities are essentially limitless. There is some foundation and some backbone that we need to rely on, and those would be essentially the commitments that we've made to our funders. And a lot of those commitments are, first year. I'll give an example. A first year commitment we've made would be 500 housing placements. So, as we're working on building out these, other ancillary services, they need to be based off of a foundation that, like we've committed to bringing on 100 shelter beds, we've committed to housing 500, participants, and help them retain their housing with social supports, or community support. So, we want to build out this system, but we do have to, stay in alignment with the commitments that we've made through our funders. And next slide, please. All right, so part of the RFPQ process is essentially to get a pool of potentials. I messed this word up the last time I did this. Potential service providers. So essentially, you do the RFPQ, you do the narrative, it comes in, it goes through the reviewing process, it gets approved, you go on to a larger list, and then we will be working off of that list to build out this larger network of service providers. And so the reason I brought that up is, as we're piecing together this system of care, if a lot of people are saying we want to do outreach, and we don't have a lot of people that say they want to get housing navigation, getting people indoors, or they don't want to provide supportive services, that we could potentially come to you later on and say, hey, we know you're really interested in doing outreach, but we really have an additional need here. Would you be interested in also, performing that need? So that's one of the great parts of having this potential list of service providers. The anticipated allocation of funding for the first year, we're looking at about $20 million. That will grow each additional year, probably peaking around 2 to 3 years in. But we'll see. And so so there's a lot of money that's going to be going out the door. So there's going to be a lot of scaling up, and there's going to be a lot of growth within your organizations throughout the community. These contracts will create qualifications that will last through funding year 24, 2025. So there will be potential for, contracts additionally growing over time as our system continues to grow or as funding increases. And all the work we're doing is definitely in partnership with Clackamas and Multnomah counties. We're not an island, neither are they. And so we want to be working together with our partner counties. We all know that our people very frequently don't really pay attention to city boundaries or county boundaries. They go where they work survival, right? So we are building out a strong partnership with those counties in this process as well. And we would ask that you do as well in the process. Next slide, please, Ty. All right, here's the fun stuff, the proposal application. So when it says max pages 2, it doesn't have to be 2 pages. Like I'm a little more of a less words kind of a guy. Sometimes I can get 2 pages worth of writing into a page. So don't feel that you need to fluff it up to meet the 2-page max. If you're able to craft your narrative in less than in 2 pages, like that's fine. Our reviewers might actually be grateful too. So there's 4 sections. First section would be organization, mission, and capacity. What does your organization do? What are your beliefs? What are you standing on? And what is your capacity for growth? What is your current capacity where you're at right now? Second section would be the equity and inclusion section. How are you providing an equitable, inclusive resource? How are you connected with your community? How are your services very culturally specific and important for the community that you serve? Third section would be your service delivery section. What services have you delivered? What partnerships do you have with other service providers? How are you connected? Are you connected with Community Connect? What organizations are you already working with? All those wonderful aspects of your organization. And then the fourth part, which is probably the most fun, is the service delivery section. And this is really you get to discuss what services you'd like to provide and how you would like to provide them. You can do up to 2 pages for a component. So Jess had said earlier about you might want to do 2 or 3. Maybe you're interested in doing some some housing navigation, but you also want to provide the supportive services once they get inside. And then you also might want to provide some culturally specific wraparound services. So write your narrative in a way where you can weave them. We're good at figuring out the weave. You can weave these components together in your narrative and tell us the story of how you'd like to provide these services, or maybe how you already have been providing these services and how it would be really nice to get some funding to do it, so you can build it out and make it more up to par with what the quality that you'd like to provide. Yeah, so don't be I wouldn't say overthink the narratives as much as just be thoughtful in your narrative approach. There's some helpful links at the end of the presentation. Our community plan, Metro's plan, the RFPQ, which you'll have access to. Utilize the resources that we've added to those links to ensure that you're not putting something out there that's completely, like not foot in step with what we're trying to do generally as a larger community, and try to align it as best you can. I would also recommend to always utilize National Alliance to End Homelessness's website and their library of documentation as a great resource when crafting these types of narratives. There is a wealth of free information out there that can really help you with crafting a really nice narrative. Next slide, please, Ty. So the evaluation process, I'm not going to read all of these words because it is in the RFPQ, but essentially each section is worth 25 points. And you need a total score of 70 to move forward with the master agreement, or it's not master agreement, to be put on the list. And so that's why I referenced essentially some of the other resources that you can utilize for some of your research. As it was said before, like low barrier, trauma informed, like you can dig into those National Alliance's website, and you can get really good definitions and help you kind of weave that verbiage into your narrative in a way that really tells the story of the services you're going to be providing. Once we get all of your narratives in your application packet, they will be reviewed by a pretty darn diverse set of evaluators throughout the county from many different levels. That is something that the Office of Inclusion and Equity has been helping us with, and Ty's team. And so there will be a very diverse set of reviewers that will be reviewing the applications, and then with the aim of trying to get you on the list, essentially. Next slide, please. Timeline. So as you know, the RFPQ has already been launched. If you're here today, you are at the Proposers Conference. We're going to accept some questions right after this. But on the same note, some questions you might ask, we might not know the answers to right now. Essentially, we are building the boat with you. As you're crafting your narratives and your programming, we're in the background creating funding allocations and contracting and scopes of work. And we're building all of these things up too on our end. So we're all growing together, and we're all learning together in this process. So why did I say all that? I essentially said all that to say that we will be posting responses to the questions on Procure Now, and also as if you have questions that didn't come up during this this webinar, maybe you're like me and you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's when your brilliance hits you in the middle of the night, and you can get up and you can walk over to your computer and you can submit the question then as well. But we just want to make sure that all of the questions are submitted by the end of the month. Then we will submit all of the answers in a couple days after that, by May 7th. And that should give you hopefully enough time to finish crafting your narrative. Submission due date is May 19th. Then it will go to the evaluators, who will have it till the 28th. On June 4th, we will be posting our qualified supplier list. If you are on the qualified supplier list, that is not a guarantee that you are going to get a contract in this first round. like I was saying earlier, I was referencing earlier, I would project that our first round is first going to fill the needs that are the commitments we've made and starting building up the system from there. And then once we've had those needs made, then we can look at, what funding is available and start building out the system from there. So, but we really are hoping that we can get a diverse and full group of providers contracted and ready to start moving July 1st. So a lot of work to go in a very short period of time, and we're ready. We're hoping you're ready as well. Next slide, Ty. And on here, the helpful links, the local implementation plan, the Metro work plan, and as well as the RFPQ link. Next slide, Ty. All right, and Ty, I'm going to hand it back to you because you are really good at wrangling.
Thank you, everyone, for the presentations, Alex and Jess for presentations, as well as Latricia for the welcoming. At this time, we are going to open it up for questions, and we can do this several ways. One is if you want to go ahead and drop a question in the chat box. I see we have one already. We'll go ahead and respond to each of those questions as they come in. And if you are interested in asking a question, go ahead and put use the emoji for raising your hand in Zoom, and we'll start a queue, and I'll keep that queue running in the chat box. And then if you would prefer to send me a direct message, I can also ask your question for you to stay anonymous. That's also another option. But at this time, you have the rest of the meeting, which is about 40 minutes to engage some of our Washington County professionals and experts. We have some staff from our procurement department as well here, so we can ask questions related to the RFP and some of the technicalities of it as well. So with that, I'll start. See Denise ask a question. Is that a 2-page maximum for each one of the first 3 and 2-page maximum for the service components?
Great question. So 2 pages for each component max, and then the 4th component, I mean, essentially that could be really long. If you're proposing maybe 5 components, you're essentially saying you could do up to 10 pages. You don't need to do 10 pages. Please don't do 10 pages, but you can do 10 pages. We won't hold it against you if you do 10 pages, if you want to do 10 pages, but yeah, it would be 2 pages, up to 2 pages max per component. And then, so if you were to do 1 component, essentially it would be 8 pages max for the whole thing. I don't know, I'm going to try to worded that a couple different ways. So hopefully I didn't make that more confusing than it had to be.
Great. I see a next question we got from Nikki. I'm curious if you know how much allowable admin costs will be once contracts are issued.
I don't think we have an answer for that yet. And I think it's going to depend on various features of there's a myriad of ways programs can be designed. So I think we need to take more time to figure out some of those programmatic structures. And that's part of why this is a proposal process to sort of establish eligibility for service provision, and then we can work on some of those more complex details of actual contract negotiating and structures at the next step. But it's a good question, and one for us and our team that is on our whiteboard as a team, and we're working on, and we'll have more information for you all as partners in the future.
Great. I see a question from Jack in the chat. Can we hear more about how disabilities are defined for this program? Can folks self-identify? Is mental health included?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for raising that. And yes, absolutely, mental health conditions are included as disabling conditions, as well as addictions and other complex conditions that are sort of beyond the more rigorous disabling conditions requirements of Social Security. So it's not that level of a definition. And yes, we aim to ensure low barrier eligibility eligibility through in this definition of disabilities, and that would include being able to self-identify. And we are still working on some of the specifics of that structure. So I don't want to say there might need to be a little bit of more structure here and alignment with our partners in the tri-counties, but being able to self-identify with a disabling condition, not requiring a doctor's letter and not requiring Social Security proof, for example, are components of the low barrier expectations of programmatic implementation.
Great. Those are all the questions we received so far. I do want to encourage folks, if you do want to ask questions, go ahead and click that hand raising emoji, or at this time, since we don't have a queue, you can go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask any questions that you would like. And then again, the option of adding your question to the chat box too. We'll try to respond to the questions. I see the next one is Becky. You mentioned this RFPQ extends through 2024, 2025. Does this mean that only folks who respond to this RFPQ will be eligible to contract with Washington County to provide their array of possible services through this time period?
Jess, you want me to? So I love how I just asked Jess if I could answer the question that we don't have the answer to. But essentially, we don't envision that there won't be another RFPQ process. We just don't know yet when the next one would be. It's really going to be dependent on the amount of providers that meet the threshold, the amount of services that we're able to move forward with this first year. And then, like any new thing, we're going to want to evaluate continuously as we're moving forward. And if we see that, near the end of the first year that, we're really happy with the services that were being provided, but we'd like to expand outwardly and bring some more, players to the table, then there might be another RFPQ process. If we have a very diverse and great list and we're still working on contracting with, organizations that haven't been contracted yet, we might want to put that off. So, there isn't a hard and fast rule on that right yet. It's really going to be dependent on, where we are at the time.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That's a very good, complicated answer. I think more the purpose here is to say our goal is to establish eligibility for a prolonged period of time so that providers don't have to go through this process again. But we understand that we might have to open up the process to invite in additional partners who didn't apply this time or didn't make it through. We just don't have the details on that part yet. So more the purpose of the period of time is we want you to know when you make this application and when you establish yourself as a qualified service provider with Washington County, it will last for a prolonged period of time.
All right, next question from Marcella. Will there be any additional points if a proposer is located in Washington County? And I guess just to extend that question a little bit, if we could talk a little bit about just location or regional requirements of the RFPQ.
This is a complicated question that we think we have an answer to, which is, but it's still a discussion with Metro. So we're going to answer it to our best abilities at this time. It's our expectation that all services provided. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. This is located inside Washington County. I'm sorry, I was answering a different question. I don't believe there are no differential in points for providers who are inside or outside the Washington County, the services are expected to be provided inside Washington County. Where the home office of that organization is does not pertain to the point structure or eligibility for this application. Pardon me and my confusion.
And then Celeste added another question. How are people with lived experience being involved in the RFP selection process or in any of the behind the scenes establishment of eligibility criteria? I guess I could talk about that a little bit. So two parts of that question. One is who are the reviewers and evaluators? So the reviewers and evaluators right now are being recruited for and also selected. There's a number of nominees that we have received from the community and from community-based organizations that don't intend to apply for this RFPQ. I will say that one of our goals for recruiting the community-based reviewers and evaluators is to ensure that there's diversity. And so that does include people with lived experience. And I think when you're talking about lived experience, you're both talking about racialized identities is included, and also homelessness. So I will say that we're working on that right now. And if you do have a nominee that you would like to send over, please go ahead and send that over to either the SHS info email or to my email directly. And there's still time to select those folks. The other portion of folks that will be evaluating are some Washington County staff and employees and other regional government and public employees as well. And then the next question that you had, behind the scenes establishing eligibility criteria. I will say that there were two sessions several weeks back that were feedback sessions that was hosted by the Supportive Housing Services and the Coalition of Communities of Color. So we invited a broad spectrum of the community to join those and to give feedback on the RFPQ before we finalize the RFPQ. And so, and in addition to those feedback sessions, we did send out a survey to a broad base of service providers and other community-based organizations to respond to that survey. And that survey's feedback was captured, and we included as much as we could in terms of the feedback to influence the final product of the RFPQ.
Can I jump in on that too a little bit? Mm-hmm. In relation to your narratives, if you as an organization already have lived experience advisory groups or board members that have lived experience or peer support structure, and there's recommendations within the programming model, please include that in your narrative and highlight those sections for us. I know that, you know, from my end, I think we're really trying to, you know, create a level of eligibility that is not above our funders. So I don't want to have creating additional barriers that don't need to be there in eligibility structure.
Great. I see, Max, you raised your hand. We'll have you go next, and then we'll come back to the chat questions.
Great, thank you. And as it relates to, and thank you for offering this awesome forum. I really appreciate it. I was going to ask around the advisory folks, do you have to be a resident of Washington County? We have presence in Multnomah County, and just was curious about that.
A resident, the participant?
Yeah, so I'm asking around those who are reviewing applications, if we are going to reach out potentially to our existing advisory council members, do these folks who are reviewing, do they have to live in Washington County?
No, they do not have to live in Washington County. In fact, we have one nominee from outside of the state as well. So
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to go back to the chat questions, but again, I encourage folks, if you do have a question, you go ahead and raise your hand and I'll try to add you to the queue. This is from Crothifer. How does this fit with the community development block grants of Washington County, Beaverton, and Hillsborough?
Hey, Ty, this is Josh. I'm the assistant director for the department. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. At this point, the CDBG funds are not being intertwined or anything like that. So those funds, like whatever processes that they're using to seek contractors or projects or anything along those lines, continue doing what you're doing on that case. And this is a separate project. But we do work really closely with our Office of Community Development here in Washington County. We also work obviously really closely with our other implementing partners who in Hillsborough and Beaverton who have CDBG allocations. So thank you for that question.
Great, thank you, Josh. Next question from Val. Ramping up hiring and capacity is especially challenging for smaller culturally specific organizations without certainty of funding. Timing is critical in securing qualified staffing. What can be done to assist in this process?
This is an excellent question. It might be a three-parter, so I invite my colleagues to help us answer. But we are keenly aware of, a broad approach and many tools and strategies that are needed to help build out capacity for our service providers, and especially culturally specific service provision here that is needed in Washington County. We're looking to do capacity building grants, essentially, to give organizations just funding to do what it takes to get that organization in a position ready to become a service provider partnering with this program. So that's a separate body of work, but we are working in partnership with the other two counties to figure out how to do this capacity building in a strategic tri-county coordinated way. But it's more than funding, right? It's technical assistance, it's training. We're looking at building out a system of training for the whole network of service provision that will be for all of the technical aspects of service providing, like Community Connect assessments and HMIS training and contract management and more, but also all of the quality of care training, like providing culturally responsive services, providing trauma-informed care, providing housing first programming. So that's some of the capacity building approaches that we'll be taking. And then one other component is we're looking at how to provide an advance, maybe it's a 1 month or maybe it's a 3-month advance in our contracts to help organizations get ready in building in hiring before outcomes and contracting or in advance of the actual service provision. So there are many components to this question, and I appreciate it very much, Mr. Valfrey. And I think the last thing to say is it's going to take time, right? This isn't going to happen over the course of the summer. It's probably not even going to happen over the course of 1 year, but it's an ongoing investment that we're going to be making in the system across the board. Anything else from my colleagues?
No, but I as we're building out, like we would want to be looking at things like letters of intent and other things like that, so that you have what you're working with before you get your contract, so that you can start, posting those positions and starting the hiring process, maybe even before you get your contract, so that you're, ready to hit the ground running.
Great, I see a thumbs up there, so looks like we can move on. I want to come back to Max. I see your hands raised again. Join the space and go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll go back to the chat.
That was an accidental raise. Apologies.
Okay, cool. All right, so Elizabeth sent a question. As an organization, we have 2 housing programs that serve different populations. Do you have a preference whether we submit one proposal that covers our range of services as an organization, or rather 2 proposals specific to each of our programs?
I think the preference is that you're registering as an organization. So one proposal that describes all of the work.
Great. And then Jack sent a question: is nutrition support considered as part of the suite suite of supportive services?
I believe you could fit that under wraparound services. If your narrative shows the need for those nutritional supports in that way, yeah. Be creative.
Great. And then I see Claudia sent a question. Will the capacity building grants, when will the capacity building grants become available?
That's an excellent question. I think I need to take responsibility to answer. Unfortunately, we don't have a specific timeline right now. Again, this is a participation or a project we're working on participating as a tri-county coordinated effort. I can just say I know that our commitment is to get them out as soon as possible because we understand the relationship between the contracts and the capacity building needed to execute the contract. But I think that the hope is over the course of the summer, we start to have more information about that timeline.
Great. And I just wanted to check with Claudia if there's any follow-ups on that question you'd like to ask at this time. We do have a little bit of space to invite folks to ask more questions if you'd like to do that now.
Well, you called out my name, Ty, so this is Claudia. I'm actually okay for the moment, but thank you.
Thanks.
And also, you know, the questions can be submitted as well. So, you know, sometimes I need a little while to simmer on something before the questions come to light. So.
Okay, it looks like we just got one more question here. I believe that this was hinted at, but wanted to clarify. How would you recommend a provider apply if we currently supply 2 services, but have a desire to pursue additional support services in the future? Should we apply just for those services we actively provide this round? Would we reapply to be considered for additional services at a later date?
So I'll say that you'll be on the list, and once you're on the list, and especially once you've started contracting with us, say for those 2 services, that there will be an open line of communication that at that point you have between your point of contacts here in Washington County and yourself as an organization. And if you know, we're looking for expanded resources, that level of communication is going to be happening with the providers on that current list that we're working with. So yeah.
And that 4th element of the application is the place for you to describe the vision of the services that you want to provide. So that's a great place to describe the more you want to do. So I think the answer is both. There's room for you to describe. We're hoping you describe both the services you do deliver and the services you hope to deliver as a partner in this program.
That is great for us to know.
Thank you. I see another question from Denise. What was the resource that Alex mentioned for narrative help? I think that would.
And the additional resource, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, their website is just phenomenal. They have a great resource library.
Okay, I will add that link to the chat here in just a second. Okay, so I'm just doing another round of checks from the whole audience. Again, thank you everyone for attending. We're so appreciative of your time today, and we may be giving back a few minutes, but I wanted to just leave a little bit of space if folks do have any last minute questions that we can add. And then before we go, I want to remind folks of the resources in terms of responding to these questions will be made publicly available. I think we set that date as May 7th, is that correct? To post those questions and answers. This video is recorded. It'll be available on our Washington County YouTube channel, and also on Procure Now. You can go to the link that I will drop it once again, but the presentation, the full presentation, will be available on the Procure Now site, and also the video for both of the meetings that we had this week. Oh, we got one more question. Great. From Claudia. We are thinking about partnering with another local nonprofit on a similar application in Clackamas County. Is that something we should reference in this proposal, and does it make a difference to our eligibility to qualify?
An excellent question. Thank you, Claudia. It's an opportunity for us to describe the difference, because Clackamas also has a procurement process open right now, and their process is slightly different. They are going using the RFP approach, the request for proposals. So those proposals will be scored and then turn into actual contracts. So it's a more direct process as opposed to our process here, which is about qualifying a network of service providers and then creating flexible and multiple paths for future contracting. So I don't know if that's been said yet, but it's, I think, an opportunity to describe a slightly different approach that Clackamas is taking. And also an opportunity to describe that when we create our qualified pool of suppliers, of partners who can provide services here in Washington County, we've already heard from our partners in Multnomah County and Clackamas County that they may be interested in being able to partner with our pool of providers and seek out to ask for contracting opportunities with the organizations in our pool. And we've said yes, we would welcome that opportunity for coordination. So that's just another piece of information here. But to answer your question, this won't make a difference in your proposal. It doesn't change your eligibility it doesn't pertain to any of the elements of the actual scoring, but it does not hurt to describe that partnership and that service provision you're already providing in Clackamas County, or you intend to provide in Clackamas County. So please go ahead and share it, but it's not a condition or changing any kind of scoring in the application process.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful questions and for your time today. I will be wrapping up the meeting here shortly. And with that, I'd like to invite either Jess or Josh to help with the wrap up of our event. And I see, Jess, you just took a mouthful. Maybe I can lean on Josh to help close us out for this meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I'm trying to show my screen, but there we go. There we go. It's having some technical difficulties. Well, I can't thank everyone enough. Like I said, it's going to be so important that over the course of the upcoming months that we work on this in partnership. I think we've put together quite a great team here at Washington County. I think if you've been engaging with us for the last couple of months, you can kind of see that we're taking on, this project with really an open mindset, and also, changing the way that we worked from in the past. So we really want your organizations to come in, be part of this process, partner with us, and we really want to have this equitable, transparent, and accountable system of care that we're building out. I just have the greatest faith in the staff that we brought on board and in your organizations to do this work together. There's thousands of houseless individuals and families out there right now who are waiting for these resources. So let's work together and let's get these resources out to them. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So good to see you, Arlita.